Welcome back to the Elevate Media Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Anderson. Today, we're going to be diving into a great conversation about conviction and also just diving into the story of Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith. So super excited to have him on the show. Can't wait to get into it. Micah, welcome to the Elevate Media Podcast, man.
Hey, it's great to be here, Chris.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me.
For sure, yeah. Super excited to have you on and have this conversation today. I'm going to dive right into it. Obviously, you're Lieutenant Governor of Indiana.
Yep.
Pretty well known. Going to be talking about conviction and kind of your story and your journey around that. But to you, like, what does conviction mean?
Well, I think it's, first of all, it means you got to know what you believe and know why you know it, right? So first, like, if you're going to have conviction, like, okay, about around what, you know?
Yeah.
Like, what is your conviction centered upon? So I think you got to have that strong understanding of your own worldview. And that takes, it takes time. That takes time to dive into, philosophers throughout world history, through, writings of, for me, it's scripture. I mean, I think all truth comes from God. And so diving into the scriptures, diving into the history of just mankind, and then understanding, the history of America and then your community, like, understanding who your community is and your nation is. And all of that begins to sort of develop your worldview, which then leads you to a conviction of something, right? And so I think that, to me, like, some people, I think, probably aren't. They think they might have conviction, but their conviction is really on shaky ground, and you can undermine their worldview or logic pretty easily with just very logical arguments, and they don't know what to do with that. And so it tells me, it's like, hey, you were convicted, but you were totally convicted in a very, like, unsound logic or reason.
Yeah. I think that's good, and we need to have that. I mean, and like you said, it's growth. Like, you can build that foundation, that stronger foundation within your convictions as you learn and study and get that experience. For you, when did you kind of get the conviction to hop into politics?
Well, I've always had, like, a love for American politics and American government, right? So even back in middle school, I remember just kind of just loving history and just, the founders, and just studying kind of, what they went through. And, they've sacrificed a lot. It's really easy to Monday morning quarterback now, in our comfortable studios, right? And by the way, you got a great studio here and great team, but just it's easy to look back and be like, well, if I was alive, I would have done it this way. And why didn't they just abolish slavery right away? They knew it was wrong. They should have just. Well, it's not that easy, right? When the system is embedded for thousands of years, like, it takes war, it takes bloodshed, it takes a lot of hard work and sacrifice and tears and to turn something that has been so ingrained into the world. And so I love their sacrifice. I mean, the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence, I mean, they gave up like everything. I mean, like, many of them were in prison. They were wealthy men of means, but yet they had conviction, and their conviction was for liberty. And it would have been way easier for them to just say, you know what? Not my fight. Yeah. I'm good. Like, I have money. I have peace and wealth, and we're just going to let the British do what the British do. King George can keep doing what he does. But they said, no, this is right, and we need to fight. And because of that, many of them were jailed. Yeah. Their children were killed, and wives were killed. Many of them had to flee from their homes. The British burned everything. A lot of them died bankrupt. Right? So, I mean, you think about the sacrifice that they laid so that we can have this, right? And then a lot of unfortunately, a lot of our just this generation just doesn't recognize it. I mean, like, oh, well, we're America. We've always had freedom and liberty. It's like, no, it's cost a lot of people dearly. And so I think for me, that's kind of what drove me to say, okay, hey, how can I steward this freedom and liberty for the next generation? If the people who went before me were willing to do that, then I should be willing to do something. Right. Now, I'm not saying that everybody has to get into politics, but we should all say, what can I do, right? So JFK's, famous speech, like, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country, right? And I think that's the heart of an American, to say, how can I give back, right? What can I do for my community and my country? And I think that's what drove me to get into politics.
Yeah. No, and I like that. I think I just watched The Patriot over the weekend.
Oh, yeah, me too.
And, it was awesome.
We do it every year.
Favorite movies.
We do it every year.
And just seeing, the sacrifice, obviously that's a movie, but
it embodied the stories of
the sacrifice that so many made for, the freedom and the future of the country.
Yeah.
Do you see any correlation between either parties, left or right wing, that protest. Do you see that as a conviction stance, or is that just kind of like
Can be. So I mean, it certainly can be. I mean, I've been a part of protests, right? Like I have a very strong conviction that life begins at conception. Very pro life. So I've been a part of pro life marches and protests. Down at the State House. Trying to abolish abortion and the murder of the unborn, and so that comes from purely, the conviction that I have.
Yeah.
I've seen other protesters when you actually get up and you ask them, "What are you protesting?" They're like, "I don't know. I'm just someone handed me a sign and said to hold it up, right?" And so that is not conviction, right?
Yeah.
So that's just you have a buddy that said, "Hey, come, let's walk in this march and protest." Or that we see a lot of times on the left, they're paid to be there, right? They're sort of these paid agitators that go into places like Los Angeles or New York or some of these bigger cities, these metropolitan areas, and they're bussed in, and it's there's a paid organizer that's really handing out signs, so it makes it look like there's a lot of people with conviction, but when you actually start to interview them, what do you believe? Right. They can't tell you. Yeah. So you do have to watch out for kind of those protests that it might make it look like, oh wow, there's a big group of people who have strong conviction over this thing. No, they don't. They're actually just kind of mindless sheep being led astray, right? So you got to be really careful not to just buy into, oh, there's a protest and looks like there's a lot of people, so that must be what the majority of Americans believe. Well, no, not usually. That's usually the opposite. So.
Yeah. And then you see like online the conversations of people just bashing, different things, and it's like for example, I just saw someone bashing Trump because he wasn't down rescuing those kids from the Texas floods, and I was like,
yeah,
are you? Like I'm not. It's a hypocritical kind of position of like, you don't know what he's doing or what moves he's making to try to help. And I think we see a lot of that keyboard warrior stuff, and it's causing so much more division than back in the day when they didn't have necessarily that much access.
Well, remember, America's always been divided, right?
Yeah.
We've always, I mean, you remember Abraham Lincoln, the greatest president of all time, or not all time, but one of the greatest presidents, and he was assassinated.
Right.
He was shot because half the country hated him.
Yeah.
Right. Now it's easy to look back and be like, well, we've got a monument to Lincoln in Washington, D.C., and he was this great, emancipator. Like he led the charge to free the slaves, and wow, what an amazing guy. And all of them, like really, I mean, 90% of Americans probably, if you poll them, I'm just as anecdotal, but I would say probably think very highly of Abraham Lincoln. The other 10% probably just don't even, know history. So, but at the time, he was really hated, right? Yeah. And so I think we have to always put it in perspective. It's anytime there's a fight for truth, anytime you're doing something that is right, virtuous, and good, the enemy, which I believe is the devil and his minions, they will always try to fight you. And you know what? That's a universal truth. Jesus said it. He said, hey, in this world you're going to have many troubles, but take heart, I've overcome the world. And he also said, hey, if they hate you, they hated me first, right? Like, what do you think, like, I'm not, Jesus said in Luke 12:51, he said, I did not come into the world to bring peace. I came to divide, right? And what is he saying? He's saying, I came to bring truth into a world full of lies, just like a good doctor. If you have a cancer patient and a doctor walks into the room, he's looking at the charts, and he looks at the charts and says, this patient has cancer, and the doctor says, you know what? You don't have cancer. You're fine, right? Like, just feel good and go about your way. Right. We would say that doctor is a terrible doctor, right? Yeah. But a good doctor would say, hey, I'm going to tell you a really hard truth right now. It's probably not something that's going to be in any way, shape, or form easy for you or fun for you. It's actually going to hurt a lot, but you have cancer. Now that you know the truth, now we can lead you on healing. And that's what people need to recognize is anytime you bring truth into a world full of lies, it's going to hurt. Yeah. It's going to be divisive. It's going to be super hard. But yet, for the love of the people or the nation, it's important that you do it. And that's what Jesus did. He said, I love you enough to come and bring truth. And so, you can boil that down to all kinds of issues in our nation right now. Yeah. But the people that I think are doing a great job are the ones that are willing to speak the hard truths out of love. And, I hope I do the same thing.
Absolutely. So, yeah. I think, like, in truth, too, like, speaking to that, like, and back to online stuff, like navigating what is actually true. that is being put
Yeah.
out there is even more
Yeah.
difficult. So it's like
Yeah.
even more important to like do the research and actually dive into topics
Yeah.
and not just take everything superficially that's being posted out there
Yeah.
because it's getting a lot harder.
It is. And again, I just, I keep going back to scripture, but again, that's where fundamentally that's the rock on which I stand.
Yeah.
And that's why God says you got to hide his word in your heart.
Yep.
Because if you don't have it in your heart, like every time I'm reading something, it always goes through the filter of what God's word says, right?
Yep.
So I can pretty quickly discern that's true and that's not, right?
Right.
There's a red flag here, or no, this is perfect. Like this is what I need to go down the path of. But a lot of people who don't have that, they just get blown around like a chaff blown in the wind, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that's, I feel like that's where we've sort of dropped the ball in America is we've sort of abandoned God's truth.
Yep.
And then people will say things like, follow your heart. I'm like, no, don't follow your heart.
Right.
Your heart, the Bible says, is wicked and desperately evil. Who can know it, right?
Yep.
And so we have all these people say, well, just do what you feel.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, like that's how we got into this mess.
Yeah.
Do what's right.
Yep.
Sometimes your feelings lie to you.
Yeah.
And you need to know when your feelings start to lie to you, you need to catch it. You need to know that it's a lie so that you can counter it with your wisdom and your knowledge, right?
Oh yeah.
So again, we live in a culture where it's, people are emotionally manipulated a lot.
Yep.
And that's why you need to know truth.
Yeah. And it's the same thing, like even in business and even as a parent, like there are things that I just some days don't want to do. Like,
Yeah,
I don't
right,
wanna do it.
yeah.
I don't feel like doing it, but I
Yeah.
know that those are the best things to do or that need to get done for the ultimate goal, whether it be to grow a business or to, have the children grow to
Sure.
respectable men.
Yeah, right,
like,
yeah.
It's kind of the same thing. And it's a daily thing, kind of, pick up your cross daily kind of thing.
That's right, yeah.
And everything.
Absolutely.
Do you have any memories or like stories of a time, maybe in your political career or even before it, that you really just wanted to play safe, but you didn't?
Oh, well, I mean, I think running for lieutenant governor was probably one of those, right?
Right, yeah.
I mean, quite frankly, I would much rather just not be in politics, and I wish America had, was going on a great track, and I could just sit back, go on autopilot, just keep doing the pastor thing or the small business owner thing.
Yeah.
That's the easy path, right? And it's not always easy to get out and speak boldly and then have the haters hate, right? And then and we've lost friends because of this. It's not good friends, people that we thought were with us through the thick and the thin, and realize, oh my gosh, like they weren't. And that's very hard, right? That's hard to walk through stuff like that. So super easy to just kind of sit back and be like, it's not my fight. But Thomas Paine, one of our founding fathers, said, I prefer peace, but if war must come, let it come in my lifetime so that my children may have peace.
Yep.
And I think that's kind of my same mindset too. It's like, I prefer peace. I wish we could all just get along.
Right.
But unfortunately, that's just not the world we live in sometimes.
Yeah. You say you lost friends, with that decision, other things negatively happen. How did you navigate that? I mean, obviously that probably felt really bad.
Mm-hmm.
What were you feeling at that time and how did you navigate those?
Well, I think you always feel, first of all, you feel hurt, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's always there's the pain of, somebody that you thought was like, with you, and then you realize, man, they just turned on me, right?
Yeah.
Because of politics, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how just kind of shallow of a reason to turn on. So, hey, you voted for Trump and I hate your guts now, right? It's like, what, for real? Like,
Yeah.
how about we talk about the policies that are,
Yeah.
oh no, you're a terrible human being, right? It's like, we dedicated your kid, like I was at your wedding, right? Like what do you mean I'm a terrible person? Like
Right.
we cared for you when you were going through the hardships of your life, and so the hurt is there, and then it leads to you got to fight bitterness, right? Like, and I think that's the thing that I would maybe encourage everyone is, if you are a follower of Christ and you recognize that God has created you, you're made in His image. You really don't have a right to be offended when people do things to you. Yeah. Like there's nowhere in Scripture does Jesus say, "Hey, take offense because somebody hurt you."
Yeah.
Right? He says, "Rise above it." He said, "You're going to be victimized, but you're not a victim." Right? Like if you're with me, you're more than a conqueror. But what happens in our culture is we feel better about ourselves when we can be like, I've been wronged.
Right.
I'm the victim.
Yep.
And then it leads to this oppression Olympics, right? Where everyone wants to be like, no, I'm the most oppressed. No, I'm the most oppressed, you know? And it leads down this like really stupid path.
Yep.
And really at the end of the day, the Lord's like, hold on, none of y'all are as oppressed as I was, right? If you want to talk about oppressed, Jesus is the most victimized.
Yeah.
He had every right to be claimed the victim, card, right?
Yep.
But he didn't.
Yeah.
He said, you know what? For the sake of people, I'm gonna wear this. I'm gonna take this on. Nobody put him on that cross. He put himself on that cross, right? He took it on the humbleness of a servant, right? And so I think when somebody wrongs you, if you're gonna follow Christ, and this is so true in the world of politics, you need to remember that the only thing that matters is what God says about you.
Yeah.
So when I have friends or former friends who are saying terrible lies, things about me or my family, I have to go back to the foot of the cross and say, Lord, tell me what you say about me, right? And if he says, no, you're not anything what they're saying, you're this over here, well, then those words are the true words. And then if I then let myself fall back into like, well, they're saying this about me, what I'm doing is I'm giving that person's words more weight and cred than Christ's words, right? So I have to make a decision. Who do I follow, right? And God's word says the sheep know his voice, right? So if I'm listening to his voice, I know his voice. And it's amazing. I saw this video the other day of a shepherd over in Israel, and they were like he told this group of people, here's the call to rally the sheep, right?
Okay.
And so they all yell out this call, and the sheep don't even respond at all. They don't even stop grazing. They're just like, but then he does it. They all look up, they all look at each other, and then they run to him, right? Same exact words, but the sheep know the shepherd's voice, right?
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of times offense comes because we really don't know the shepherd's voice. And so if the shepherd's saying, hey, Chris, like, you're not anything that they're saying, and you should be like, oh, great, that's all I needed to know.
Yep.
And now I can go about my day, right? With joy and peace, and they can yell all kinds of things. But oftentimes we listen to their voice more than we listen to our Creator's voice.
Distracted with the noise instead of listening to the true voice. Yeah. And with that picture of the shepherd and the sheep, I thought it was going back to Patriot too. The pastor is going to head out with them to fight.
Yeah, I love it.
They're like, Reverend? And you're like, sometimes the shepherd has to, fend off the wolves,
That's
right?
right. That's so good.
So in the world, like, I think a lot of time people think, oh, you're a Christian, you can't maybe speak your mind, you can't get maybe a little bit heated, you can't do things like that. How do you kind of walk that line of, the point where you kind of have to fend off the wolves in maybe a hard tone, or yelling, even something like, so how do you navigate that within your life?
So Exodus 15:3 is one of my favorite verses. It says, the Lord is a warrior, Yahweh is his name. Like, what is a warrior? Like, you think of a warrior, somebody that goes to war and kills, right? Kills evil.
Yep.
And if we're made in God's image, well, guess what? We're warriors, right? Job 39 talks about how God created the war horse, right? He laughs at fear. He pounds his hoof when he hears the battle trumpets, right? He gets excited to run into the battle, right? Because he's been created that way. Well, guess what? We've been created that way too. So any pastor that doesn't think he's going to go to war is an idiot, right? Like, your whole point of being a pastor is to be a shepherd. When the wolf or the lion or the bear comes into the pasture, you take this is crazy. If you go to Psalm 23, David says, he says, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Well, that's really important to know what a rod and a staff do, the tools. The staff is the shepherd's crook that kind of drags and corrals the sheep. But the rod was like the 9mm, right? It's the weapon of war, right? And so, and that's where kings in antiquity would get their scepters from, right? It was the symbol of the shepherd's rod, right? And so they would hold this thing, and they would say, I'm the king, and I protect the people of my kingdom, right? So when evil comes, I'm the first one going out with the rod to defend my people and ward off evil. And so, so pastors have to see themselves the same way. And then the Patriot, that example of the pastor, the reverend going out, what they were hitting on was a group of pastors in the early Revolutionary War. They were called the Black Robe Regiment.
Okay.
And so the Black Robe Regiment was they got their most famous pastor was a guy named John Peter Gabriel Molenberg, and he was a pastor in 1775 in the Virginia, Maryland area, and he was preaching in his black robe, and he was preaching, and by the way, when you see the British in that movie, The Patriot, they go into church towns and burn the churches and go after the pastors. That was accurate. They would because liberty was being preached from the pulpits. So these pastors were the ones spurring the revolution. They were saying what General Washington is doing is a godly thing. We should join him in the fight. So John Peter Gabriel was preaching this message, and he's in Ecclesiastes 3, to everything there's a time under heaven, a season under heaven. And he gets to verse 3:8, and it says there's a time for peace and there's a time for war. And he throws off his black robe and he says, gentlemen, now's the time for war. And it's an amazing story. And he leads about 300 men in that town out to join George Washington in the 8th Virginia Brigade. And a lot of historians have said if the pastors didn't do that, we wouldn't have won the revolution, right? Yep. And he recognized, I'm a shepherd. Now, the interesting thing about John Peter Gabriel Molenberg is that his brother, Frederick Molenberg, was also a pastor up in New York. And he finds out that John Peter has engaged in war with General Washington. He writes a letter to John Peter, and he says, John, he says, you're an idiot. Essentially, I'm paraphrasing, right? And he says, you should not be engaged in these earthly politics, these battles, right? Like, this is dumb. What are you doing? You should just preach the gospel, right? Just tell people about Jesus. Sing Kumbaya, and John Peter writes back to Frederick, and he says, no, he says, I'm a shepherd. He said, God is the author of liberty in the spiritual realm and the natural realm. And whenever liberty is under attack, it's my job as a pastor to go and defend liberty. And so Frederick is kind of like, well, I think you're wrong, but okay. Well, a few months later, the British come into Frederick Molenberg's town, and guess whose church they burned to the ground? They burned Frederick's to the ground. Right. And then guess who engages and becomes part of the battle in the War for Independence? Frederick Molenberg. 11 years after the War for Independence, if you go and you look at the First Continental Congress, the very first Speaker of the House is a guy named Frederick Molenberg. Wow. So here's a guy, a pastor, who didn't want to engage in politics. He was like, no, we should just preach the gospel. We should just like sing Kumbaya. And he realized what happened when the wolf comes into the pasture. He's like, oh, shoot. Like, we need to stand up and do something about this. It's like, no joke. You should have, right? And yet he realized he was wrong. He got engaged and then became the very first Speaker of the House of Representatives in the United States. So just a really cool story about the history of America. But it all sparks from people who know what God says about liberty and know why it's important to defend.
For sure.
And until Jesus comes back, we will always be fighting and defending liberty. So I always tell people, don't ever think that the battle is over. Right? Like, because the war's not won.
No.
And we might go through an election. Listen, 2024 election was awesome. I mean, I think we kicked butt. From federal, state, local. I mean, it was awesome. And I had a couple people afterwards in the last few weeks even. I was talking to a lady yesterday. She was like, I just thought the battle was going to be like over after that. I said, whoa, no, the battle's not over until Jesus comes back. So don't think that in an election, like now you can just sit back and go on autopilot, throw your hands back and you're going to always have to fight for liberty because as long as the devil is prowling around like a lion, he's going to try to rip liberty from our hands, and it's going to be the people of God that are going to have to stand up and defend it in the public square. So in politics, in the business world, in family, in schools, in education, we're going to have to fight it on all fronts. So it's a good reminder. But I love the Patriot because it highlights that a lot.
It does. It really does. And so how do you do? So I've always been curious how that works in politics. Obviously, because you have left, right wing, independence, things like that. When you're trying to get things done to better liberty, and you have people saying one thing and then they do another. You're trying to be at things best. Like, how do you navigate all the quote unquote corruption? From out here is what it looks like, obviously. But
there is a lot of corruption.
So how do you deal with that? Like, it almost feels like it could be there's no way to win it because everyone's just looking out for themselves, kind of thing.
Yeah. I think I've heard the saying, and I think it's very true. There's really not red or blue. There's just green, right? It's just about money, right? Like it's the love of money is the root of all evil, is what Jesus said. And so that's absolutely true. I believe that is a huge problem, and so you have to go into the lion's den full well knowing that you are around people that might say something that sounds good, but their motives are completely the opposite.
Yeah.
And so you just kind of have to know you're in the lion's den, right?
Yeah.
Like when you're in there and you know you're surrounded by a bunch of lions, well, okay, good. Now you know. And so, but it's the people who kind of go in with, I think, naivety, and they kind of walk in, they're like, all these people are my friends, and then they get devoured, and like, what just happened?
Right.
So and I certainly have come in with that same perspective. Like I'm not trusting anybody, right? Like I don't.
How does that work then? If you can't trust anyone, how do you actually how do you work through actually making progress?
Because our founders said it the same way. They recognized they couldn't trust the government they were building, right?
Sure.
So, but they all know that every human has some sort of personal ambition, right? And so they use ambition in a way that just doesn't stop a person's ambition to better themselves, get richer, have a better life for them. Yeah. They were able to harness that fallen nature, that sin nature, right, of greed, and harness it in a way that just kind of moved it down the path where it would actually protect liberty. And so I think it's the same way where I don't necessarily spend time saying, hey, you're super greedy and you've got an ambition that's like, totally not for the people of Indiana. I just kind of say, how can I use your ambition to get you to do things that you think are going to be best for you, but it's also going to benefit the people of Indiana, right? Like, I'm not going to waste my time going in and trying to make sure that the 150 people in the legislature in Indiana are like good-hearted people, right? It would be foolish for me to kind of say, we need to change everybody's heart at the legislature. Right. No, I'm just going to say, hey, I know you're about yourself, but guess what? You doing this thing that's going to help Hoosiers is going to better you in this way. So why don't you do this thing that will ultimately better Hoosiers too, right? Yeah. And I can play that game, right? Where I can say, okay, you're doing it for the wrong motives, but I'm going to still help you see the path to do the right thing anyway. Yeah. Again, motives are wrong, but as long as you're doing the right thing, I don't really care. Yeah. And so that's and you see that in Scripture too. I think it was Paul. Like his disciples came and said, "Hey, there's a group of people that are preaching Jesus Christ, but they're doing it for their own wealth and their own gain." Yeah. And he's kind of like, "Well, so what? Like, let them preach. Are they preaching anything wrong? Well, no, they're preaching and people get saved. Yeah, okay, fine. Like they're building the kingdom." God will deal with the motives, right? Those people will have to answer for their own greed, right, and selfishness, but they're still preaching the truth. Yeah. So good. Like, stop worrying about their personal motives. And I think that's what the founders, James Madison said in the Federalist Papers. He said, if men were angels, we would need no government, right? And that's the whole point of him saying that was, okay, they're not angels, okay, and they're not demons either. They're somewhere in the middle. Yeah. So how do we just sort of corral that sort of selfish nature into the right lane, right? And that's the beauty of our republic, is that the separations of power, the boundaries that the founders created, help to corral the fallen sin nature of man just into a way that actually, for the most part, protects liberty for people. And it's a beautiful system. Yeah. And that's why there has been really no other nation like us, because the founders knew the sin nature. Yep. They knew the Creator. Mm-hmm. They knew what His Word says and His ways were, and they were able to build this amazing sort of self-protecting system where you could have the most corrupt person in government, and yet they can't even get it off the rails on their own, right? And that to me is beautiful. Yeah. Right? It's very slow. Yep. It's very tedious. Right. It also means that we can't fix things overnight either, right? Exactly. But that's for our own protection, because if you could change it quickly, that means you get one bad person coming in and they grab the mechanisms of power and they could destroy it overnight. Yeah. The founders are like, no, we're going to make it really hard for this machine to move. Yeah. And that has been such a beautiful thing for us. Oh, for sure. It's crazy to look back at that, like that they had enough wherewithal, vision to see that and see what they had learned from, Yeah, they studied history. Yeah. They knew the Roman Republic. Mm-hmm. They knew the Greek city-state. They knew philosophers like Montesquieu and Aristotle and Plato, John Locke. They studied, Adam Smith. All of these people that were just world leaders when it comes to philosophy of governance, right?
Yep.
And you know where they got the most amount of their wisdom from when they were building our system?
The Bible.
The Bible. Yeah, they went to the Bible more than any other document, any other written book in history. And they, it was the most quoted document that they said, hey, the Bible says this. And out of the Bible, they went to Deuteronomy, right?
Yeah.
Deuteronomy was really the chapter of the Bible that they studied the most, which is all about civil law, right? It's all about civil governance and God's idea for governance. And even stories like, in Exodus, where you have Jethro, I think it's Exodus 18, you have Jethro, the father-in-law of Moses,
Right.
telling Moses, hey, you need to set up a Republican form of government, right? And he tells, so a Republican form of government is just this representative government, right? Where you elect people to then be those who govern. Yeah. And so Jethro tells Moses, you're trying to do everything as a king, right? You're trying to 2 million people wandering the wilderness, and they're coming to you with all their problems every day. Yeah. You don't have enough hours in a day, buddy. Like you need to do something different. And he says, raise up for yourself competent men, godly men who hate dishonest gain, and place them over the thousands, the hundreds, the 50s, and the tens, right? So that was what we call the first Hebrew Republic. That was the first republic in world history, and it was the Hebrew Republic. And so the founders saw that, and they were like, well, that worked for Moses. And God used Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, to really help him in the time of need to create good governance. Yeah. Why don't we do that? And so what they did is they created the thousands, hundreds, 50s, and 10s. Yeah. The thousands was the federal government, right? Then you have the hundreds, which is the state government. Yep. Then the 50s, which is the county government, and the 10s, which is the city government. Okay. And they just said, it works. When you apply God's principles, it works. Yeah. The inspiration for our 3 branches of government came from Isaiah 33:22. The Lord is our judge. That's the judicial branch. The Lord is our lawgiver. That's the legislative branch. And the Lord is our king. It is he who will save us. So the founders saw that, and they said, well, God can do all 3 of those things perfectly. We can. Right. We should probably break them up and have 3 separate branches of power that are checks and balances. And so, again, they're going back to Scripture, and they're saying, okay, God already has provided the answers. We just got to find them. Yeah. And Proverbs says it's to the glory of God to hide the mysteries of God, but it's to the glory of kings to search out the mysteries, right? And so, like, we're kings and we're queens, right? Yeah. There's in the heirs of the kingdom of heaven. So it's to our glory when we search out the mysteries of God, and that's what the founders did. They said God has the answers here. We just got to search them out, and now we glorify those men, right, and those women who did so much for our nation. Well, why? Because they searched out the mysteries of God, and we give them honor and glory because they were like, wow, they were great people. Well, how were they great people? Because they found the truth that God had hidden, and they searched them out. They fought for them. They enshrined them in our republic, and here we are today, 250 years later. And so it's amazing.
It is crazy.
Yeah,
having a conviction and having this, leadership position comes with a lot, and so you have to have the strength. You have to have kind of fortitude to stay with it. Is there someone you kind of give props to, or that has helped you get to having this ability to manage and lead and things like that?
When it comes to staying true to your convictions, people may love this or hate this, but I look at President Trump and they tried to shoot him twice, tried to throw him in jail. Yeah. They vilified him for years, right? To the point where, after 2020, people was like, this guy's done. He's like, he's washed up, never again in politics. And he just came back. And we're coming up on the year anniversary of the Butler, Pennsylvania shooting, right? Where the bullet nicks his ear, takes out the one man died. I think a couple people died, maybe even, but the Corey, I forget his last name, I'm blanking, but the firefighter. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he, and yet he stands up and he has his fists in the air. Yeah. He says, fight, fight. You know what I'm saying? And I'm just like, oh my gosh. Mm-hmm. Like, if I can't take some of the arrows that I take, and he can go through that because he loves this nation, and he, I shouldn't complain about anything. I got nothing on him, right? Yeah. And I think a lot of it is God ordained. I've said from 2015, 14, when he rode down that escalator and he declared that he was going to run for president. Initially, I was like, there's no way. Like, who is this guy? Like a reality television star? Yeah. He'd be a terrible president. And you had like Marco Rubio,
Yep.
you had Huckabee, you had Jeb Bush, you had, I think, gosh, Ben Carson. I mean, you had a bunch of really like well-equipped
Yeah.
presidential candidates.
Yeah.
And Trump was saying all the wrong things and yet still was being elevated, right?
Right.
And I remember the Lord just kind of said, Micah, if I'm in this, don't get in the way, right?
Yeah.
And I was just like, okay, Lord, if he's the guy you've chosen,
Yeah.
then we don't want to get in the way. You know, David was very clear: don't come against God's anointed. Right?
Mm-hmm.
He could have taken out Saul. He probably would have been justified to take out Saul. But he said, hey, if God's using him, then I'm not getting in the way of that. I mean, I always like what he does,
Right.
but and I've just seen that with President Trump, where I mean, it is super clear now. I don't think I've not heard anybody try to refute this at this point. Like, God is in this, right? I mean, he should be dead.
Yeah.
Right now,
It's crazy.
right? He should be in jail. He should be dead. He should be like, and I'm not saying he should be in jail because he did anything wrong. I'm saying,
But they tried
they used lawfare against him, right?
Yeah.
And they threw all like these frivolous, accusations at him that wouldn't have stood up in any normal court of law, but in these leftist courts, they were trying to throw him in jail, right?
Yeah.
And so I say all that to say, gosh, if God chooses a man like Trump and he's willing to have that supernatural strength to stand up and fight, then we should be able to do that too. And so I would say, I pull some inspiration probably just watching what President Trump has gone through, and just say, okay, if he can do that, then I certainly can do this.
Yeah.
So,
and he seems to like it. I think it's just he was so different because I think he just seemed more like, what's the word I'm trying to think. He didn't sugarcoat things. Like, he didn't hide. He just wore like. He
Tells
was
you
just
what
him.
he's thinking.
It just seemed to be him out in the open, just like he would be not in the open. So
that's what I love about him.
Yeah.
Is he tells you what he thinks.
Yeah.
For years, we've had politicians that tell us what they think we want to hear. Right.
Yeah.
And I hate that. It's like, I'm an adult. I'm a grown man.
Yeah.
Tell me what you believe about this issue.
Yep.
I may not agree with you, but tell me what you believe.
Yeah.
And so I've taken that same approach. Like, I do town halls around the state. There's not too many state politicians that are doing as much as I'm doing when it comes to getting out
For sure.
and taking the punches but I will always tell everyone at these town halls, it's like, you may not like it, but I'm going to tell you exactly why I think what I think. I'm going to tell you what I believe. I'm not going to sugarcoat it because you're all adults.
Yeah.
And I'm going to give you the respect of being able to, handle what what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I want my politicians and leaders in the state and just in government in general to tell me what they believe about about what the issues, and we can disagree on it, but just be honest with me.
For sure. Yeah, and I think we've lost some of that too, is being able to have those conversations of differing opinions and just, hey, we don't agree.
Yeah.
Okay, no big deal. Like, you maybe not like that person, but like, there's just so many more elevated like arguments online because we just can't have the like conversations in person.
Well, keyboard warriors are funny because I'll find some of these people who are super bold on social media when they're hiding behind a screen, and then I'll see them out in real life, and I'll go up to them and I'll say, "Hey, I saw your comment about this or your criticism about this." And I mean, this is how it always goes. I've not ever had a situation not go this way. They will either like basically just stop talking and walk away, or they'll backpedal and be like, well, you're doing fine. It's just, I just wanted to, share some credit. And it's like way more like tamed down. But I was like, wow, man, on social media, like you were calling for my like, hanging, right? Like, you wanted me like death by firing squad. Oh, well, that might have been a little too far, right? And so I love going up and finding people face to face, having conversations with people who disagree with me, because at the end of the day, most of the time, their bark is far worse than their bite. So
I think at the end of the day, we're all human too, and we just trying to make the world a better place the best we can.
Yeah, you hope so. Yeah,
hope so.
Yeah, you hope so. I mean, there's some people where I feel like they're trying to make the world a worse place. But but yes, I think if you have if you have truth, if you know it's the laws of nature, and nature's God, right? If you know the basic laws of nature, hopefully that you will aspire to make the world a better place. And the founders said these are self-evident truths, right? You don't have to be a Christian. You don't have to know God to recognize these truths. Like any idiot, any dummy can understand it, right?
Right.
And so hopefully, no matter somebody's faith background, they can recognize the self-evident truths of nature
Yeah.
and the laws of nature and the laws of the God who put those laws in place.
Yeah.
I think the battle that we're in right now is that even those laws are now under attack. Like the very basic objective truths are under attack. The fact that we have to legislate down at the State House, I'm glad we did, but the fact that we had to legislate that boys can't play in girls' sports because some boy might think he's a girl is absolutely insane.
Yeah.
And, we legislated that.
Yeah.
So that way, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. It said, boys, you play in boys' sports, girls, you play in girls' sports.
Yeah.
And by the way, you're a boy if you're biologically born with you know what, and you're a girl if you're biologically born with you know what.
Right.
And so, but the fact that we have to actually codify that in law now is really frightening, because that tells me that the self-evident truths are being attacked.
Yeah.
And the laws of nature, nature's God are no more.
Right.
And so that means when there is no objective truth, that means everybody's truth can be right.
Right.
And if your truth is that you want to go out and murder somebody and take their car because it would be better for you, who's to say that's wrong?
Right.
And then we teach things like evolution in school, right? And evolution says we're all animals. We've just evolved. And I say, okay, fine, if you want to teach that, but don't be mad when kids commit suicide, because all they're doing is they're not strong enough to make it to the next day.
Yeah.
And we've taught them that survival of the fittest means that the strong survive and the weak die. If there is no creator, there is no laws of nature in his law, then we're just animals, and we should all just be killing each other, trying to take what is better for us, right? It should just be all about us.
Yeah.
But you won't find even the far left radical won't agree with, oh, well, we should just go out and kill everybody, right?
Yeah.
And take for us. There is a conscience that was placed there by God, their creator, that they know that's not right. Yeah. It's not right to vilify and hurt somebody else because that person has value. And I always say, well, why does that person have value? If we're just animals, lions will attack a gazelle, rip that thing to shreds. Yeah. Nobody cares about that. It's not like, I feel sorry for the gazelle, but you know what? That's life.
Yeah.
Like, why don't we do the same thing as humans?
Yeah.
Oh, because there's something different about humans. Well, what's different about humans? Oh, we're created. We're made in the image of an amazing God. He says we're valuable. Therefore, we're not like lions, right? We're not like animals that just evolve and do whatever the heck they want.
Exactly.
We actually are very, very different. Yeah. And so it's called the Imago Dei. Like, we are the image bearers of God, and that's why we have value. But we won't teach that in school. Right. And then I get legislators be like, we got to do something about suicide. I'm like, start teaching creationism. Yeah. Start teaching that these kids are created with value. Yep. And then that will take care of the suicide. Well, we can't do that, separation of church and state, blah, 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 all this nonsense, which, by the way, the founders would have never in a million years envisioned school systems that weren't preaching the Bible in school and teaching the Bible in school. And they even said, like, you got to teach the Bible in school. Noah Webster said the Bible needs to be taught in school. Benjamin Rush said the Bible needs to be taught in school. The Northwest Ordinance of 1787 says 3 things we need to teach in the public school system in America and this new nation is religion, morality, and knowledge. Yep. Article 3 of the Northwest Ordinance says it right there. Religion needs to be in public schools in America, right? Why? Because they recognize when you teach a child that they are created with inherent beauty and value and inherent liberty, right? We will treat one another very differently than if we just think that we're some glob of cells that's randomly evolved by chance, right? Yep. And so, but we won't do that in American schools. Yeah. And then I hear legislators and people say, "Oh my gosh, the suicide, the mental health." I'm just kind of sit back and be like, "What'd you expect? You're feeding the kids poison, and now you're shocked that they're sick. Yeah. Like, don't come to me and complain about that. Right. I'm giving you the way to fix it. You just don't want to do it." So So anyway, that's it's a little soapbox.
No, I mean it's true. We see more and more of it, and it's it's really sad. And I think that in turn with the family unit being attacked. And things like that is just really a detrimental spiral. Yeah. That we're seeing more negative. I mean, my wife's a teacher, and she's like, either both parents are working, so like the kids are taking care of the other siblings, or there's one parent in a lot of the homes, and there's just more and more issues that they just want to say everyone's on the, autistic spectrum and stuff. And I'm like, I think there's more to it than that. I mean, right now they want to say everyone's on a spectrum of some sort.
Yeah, right.
I think it's what we're
It's like,
feeding them and what we're.
these boys have ADHD.
Yeah.
No, they're just boys,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah,
you don't need to medicate the living daylights
Yeah.
out of them. They're just
Exact-
boys.
Yes.
And by the way, this lecture style post progressive movement Woodrow Wilson era education
Yes.
doesn't work for boys, and that's actually not what the founders ever intended.
Right.
Classical education is very different than modern education.
Yep.
And with Woodrow Wilson, FDR,
Yeah.
and the progressive movement, they warped our school. John Dewey was a big
Yep.
proponent of this terrible progressive education system, and it was the aristocrats of our culture that were saying we need more factory workers.
Yes.
And so they changed schools to
Yep.
prepare factory workers.
Thank
even
you,
even the
yes.
bell, right?
Yes.
The bell going from class to class
Shifts
was
over
was
your
was to
lunchtime.
model
Yeah.
the bell on the factory line.
Yep.
Shifts over, move to the next thing, right?
Yep.
Bell rings, come back from your break,
Yeah.
get back on the line. All of that was never there
Yeah.
in the original
Right.
vision of American public education. And yet we've done this, we've done this, and now we wonder why in the world did that? Like, why is everything falling apart? Why is everything going to hell in a handbasket?
Yeah.
And so yeah, with education, I just think we just need to go back to the way that the founders saw it, that God intended it to be.
Yeah.
And I will say, if you're listening and you're a young person, the way to be the most successful in life is to graduate high school, get a job, get married, and then have kids.
Yeah.
Like that is the success sequence that is, you will be 97%, I believe I saw the stats on this, 97% of young people who do it that way will have successful, prosperous lives. They will be upper middle class and upper class. They will move up the chain. They will have a lot more stability, peace, happiness, right? If you want to be in poverty, you're 4 times more likely to be in poverty by having a child out of wedlock.
Yep.
Like just by every metric, every stat. So again, the success sequence in our culture: graduate, get a job, get married, and have kids.
Yeah.
Right, and you will be successful.
My wife's a teacher, and so we have that conversation about the system. I'm like, if you look at it, it's literally structured just like going to like a job.
Yeah,
Like, so that's all they're in. Like, and nothing to the teachers. Teachers are trying to do a difference, make a difference, but like it crushes creativity. It doesn't open up the ability, and that's kind of like why we're considering homeschooling, is to have the teaching, but also get them involved in other extracurricular activities.
Yeah.
That is gonna be more beneficial for them going forward. Plus, we could teach them probably what they need in like 3 to 4 hours versus a whole day.
Yeah.
And break it up we want, and then like for me owning a business, like I would love to take the kids to networking events so they can learn to speak to people.
Yeah.
And make eye contact and things of that nature. So
I think it's great.
yeah, it's an interesting
Well,
thing.
and one of the things that I've been a big advocate for many years, and proud of the legislature and the governor for signing this into law this year, was universal vouchers.
Yeah.
Right. So we're taking the voucher system, which means now as a parent, you can take your tax dollars and apply it to the education that you want for your kid. It just doesn't go to your public school just because you live in an area. It goes to where your kids are being educated, which is super fair. It actually boosts competition amongst schools.
Yeah.
And it's every time we see this applied in other states, the education system just gets far better for parents and students, which then actually makes it better for teachers, right? When more parents are engaged, when students are doing better,
Yep.
teachers are happier.
Yep.
There's ways. I mean, you're able to now have competition in the marketplace of teachers, where we'll boost competitive pay. It will bolster the pay of teachers. And so all this to say is like that's Indiana's on the right track when it comes to education. It's just going to take time for this to start playing out. But this year we just signed into law the universal vouchers. So that means there used to be vouchers, but there was a price cap on what you make. But now it's open to anyone, and doesn't matter what you make. So
That's awesome. That's cool. Along with some of the political things, we've been hearing rumors of Indiana taking over some of Illinois. Is that
That's true.
Is that true?
That is
that
true.
gonna
Yeah,
happen?
yeah. That actually. So the way that works
Interesting.
is, within our Constitution, you can do that. Like, you could have states or counties secede, right? So a state could secede from the union, counties could secede from the state. But the way it works is, first of all, the counties have to vote on it, right?
Okay.
They've got to.
Yeah.
And then it goes to then what it did. So there was 30, I think it was 33 counties, I believe, in Illinois, kind of that central part of Illinois.
Yeah.
That's very much like Indiana.
Yeah.
American values,
Yep.
pro-family values. It's not the Chicago communist values that we see,
Right.
birthing up. And unfortunately, Chicago runs Illinois, right? So so a lot of these counties in southern part of the state of Illinois are like, we are totally like hostage to Chicago, and they hate it. And so so then what that did is once those 33 counties chose to and voted on becoming part of Indiana, then it comes to the Indiana legislature.
Okay.
So Speaker Houston, he took that was kind of his like his baby this year, right? Which I think was great.
Yeah.
He ran with that, and it passed the House and the Senate, went to the governor's desk, and so we now legislated that, yes, we want these 33 counties to be a part of Indiana, right? So now what it has to do, go to Springfield, Illinois, which is their capital. They have to vote now to let them go.
Okay.
Now that's probably never going to happen, right? And J.D. Pritzker, who's a far left radical, would probably never in a million years let him go. It's like, it's probably going to have to be a Pharaoh Moses moment, like Pharaoh let my people go. Like it's probably going to have to be 10 plagues hitting Illinois for them to actually let go of these counties. But if they did, if Springfield did, if miraculously say, yes, these counties can go join Indiana, then they would have to be finalized by Congress. Okay. So then it would go to the U.S. Congress, and they would have to ratify that and say, yeah, we agree that this is good for, these two states and the nation. And then it would redraw the lines, and Indiana would kind of look like this backwards J. Yeah,
be something.
Yeah, backward J. Yeah. Like kind of like it'd be sort of weird, like a weird L. Wait, weird L backwards J. No. Yeah, I know. Backwards L.
You're right.
Backwards L. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Backwards L.
So yeah.
It would be. So has that ever happened in our lifetime? Something of that magnitude, that many counties seceding from a state?
Well, no, not secession.
Okay.
State lines were drawn. Obviously, we were expanding westward, right?
Yep.
And so there was always kind of this, like, hey, how are we going to? What's this new state going to look like, right? Mm-hmm. So there was that type of conversation, like, hey, this county should be, or this place should be a county, and it should be part of Idaho and not, Washington or Montana or whatever, So the so we did have those conversations, but nothing to this magnitude of that. There was, during the time of the Civil War, I guess you could say the South seceded from the North, right? Sure. And there was and they did create their own government from that perspective, but it was the Congress never recognized it, right? It wasn't like the Congress said, yeah, you guys can go be your own. It was, no, we're not going to let you, and we're going to fight to keep the Union together. Mm-hmm. And so, but the South just said, and sometimes that happens. I mean, you have states' rights, and a state could be like, we don't care what you say, Congress, we're going to do it anyway, right? And there's health. I think that's a healthy aspect of our republic is we are not one nation. We are a combined 50 sovereign states under one nation's banner, right? And so that's why we are the United States. Yep. And people need to remember that. Like, and I love that because you have 50 experiments of democracy, right? Like that are able to kind of, this works for us. We get to watch it. I mean, the marijuana debate is a really good example of that. Yeah. It's like, should we legalize marijuana? Well, let's see, how's it impacting Michigan? How's it impacting Colorado? Right. And California? And we've gotten to see like real-time data over the last 10 years of legalization of recreational weed, and it's not really going well for those states. Right. Like, it's actually, for every dollar they bring in tax revenue, they're spending $4 to clean up the mess that it creates. And so that's the beauty of this great 50 state union, and so I just think it's fantastic. So yes, we are one nation under one banner, but we are 50 sovereign states. COVID was a great example of that too. Yeah. Man, praise God, we lived in Indiana, even though Indiana didn't do things perfectly. Right. We were way better than California. Yeah. Right. Yeah. We weren't as good at Florida. Right. I wish we would have looked more like Florida. Right. Yeah. But again, that's cool. Like, we could say, hey, we're better in California. Probably should be more like Florida. Yeah. And then we can push our leaders to say, hey, look what's going on in Florida. Like, do that. Yeah. Look what's happening in California. Don't do that. Right? So
we say that a lot.
Yeah.
Don't do that. Yeah. And 50 states could be 51 if Canada joins.
That's right, man. Listen, I'd be all for that. 51st state. It's odd that when the national anthem plays in the NHL now, the Canadians will boo. It's odd that they're booing their future national anthem.
Right. Exactly. And Canadians used to be so nice. I don't understand how they boo. So that's good. So as you're leading, and we'll wrap this up shortly, but how do you lead others to operate with conviction like you have?
Well, you've got to be willing to. I think good leaders let others stand on their shoulders to go further than they even can have gone.
Yeah.
And I learned this sort of in the band world. I was a music teacher, and I was I first of all started out as a touring musician, and so I was playing on some of these big stages, arenas, big festival stages, thousands of people, right? Like, and so I was in this pretty successful, that was a full-time gig of mine, right? And I left that, and I started working with students, and we started doing the same thing. We started taking students to do these festivals and events. I was training them up how to be professional musicians in the touring band world, right?
Yeah.
And they were doing things that even I didn't get to do when I was a professional, right? And I remember like there was a season where I was a little jealous. I was like, man, you got these 16, 17, 18-year-olds that I'm helping give them opportunities that I had never even was able to experience, right?
Right.
And then I have to be now like backstage off to the side of the stage when they're out there doing the thing that I always wanted to do.
Right.
And it was really like it wasn't a long period, but there was a short period where I was like, I had to battle jealousy.
Yeah.
But then quickly I realized it's like, well, no, this is the heart of a really good leader, right? Like they're doing things that I'm helping them. Without me, they couldn't have done that, right? Like they would have never been able to have those opportunities.
Right.
And now they're on stages and performing in ways that I wish I could have, and yet they get to do it. And it turned into this like proud parent moment where I think any parent that's a good parent wants their kids to do more than they ever did and experience more than they ever did. And that's the heart of true love. If you think about it, like that's the heart of the Father. When Jesus said, you'll do even greater things than I've done, how can he say that being God himself, right? Unless he has the heart of a parent, right? And not to say he couldn't do it, but he chooses to leave things to us to do so that he can say, I didn't even do that. Like a story when Peter's shadow was falling on people when they were walking through towns. And because of the anointing God had given to Peter, the shadow was hitting people who were sick and people were getting healed from that. That's never recorded that happened with Jesus, right? So I would argue that that's a greater thing that Peter did than even Jesus did. Not because Jesus is God, but because God is a good father and says, Peter's my son. I want him to do some things that I can brag about, right? Look what Peter's doing. I didn't even do that, right? And it's hard for us to wrap our mind around that because he's God, right? How can we do things that are greater than what he's done? But he's the one who said that, right? So we know it's true because he said it. And so, but any good leader is going to have that same heart, right? And in the world of politics, in the world of business, oftentimes the people at the top don't ever think, what can I do to make the people around me go further than I've ever gone? They think, what can I do to get these people to do what I want them to do? Right? Yeah. So that my lot in life is better. Right. And that's actually the opposite. God doesn't do that. So we shouldn't. So it's the principle of servant leadership, right? So servant leadership is the most powerful, effective type of leadership, but it means you have to be the one that will step down and like get in the mud and the crap, and then you let the people that you're leading use your shoulders to stand on to go further than you've ever gone. And that's how I strive to lead my office. So the executive office, the staff that I work with, the team that I work with, it's like if they could run for, governor someday and I could help them get there, maybe I won't ever be governor someday. But if I could help them get there, shoot, that's awesome, right? If they could run to be president someday, maybe I won't ever get there. But if I could help them, like that's awesome, right? And so I think that's the mark of a good leader. And maybe just be like, if I can help them, if they have a business aspiration, like maybe I can help them with that and go further in business than I was ever able to go. And so I think good leaders are those people that, and I've had them in my life that have poured into me. And here's how you know they're a good leader is because every time you're around them, you get better and they make you better and they further you in your journey, right? Those are the good leaders. And guess what? Those are the type of people that everybody wants to be around,
True.
And so, whether you're doing it here in Elevate or, if you're in a family or in politics, if you get up every morning and say, okay, the people that God brings into my path today, how can I help them be better and go further in their journey? Everybody's going to want to be on your team.
Right.
They're going to be like, shoot, like every time, people work with Chris, they become awesome. Like they go out and like they're more successful. They're more like, impactful.
Right.
And that's really the mark of a good leader. And but you got to be humble, and you have to be willing to recognize that I hold people like this, not like this, right? Like I'm going to hold people to where it's like, hey, ultimately, Lord, they're just using me as a platform right now, and they're not mine. And I've got to be willing to let them go when God chooses, to lead them a different direction. That's a really hard one when you have great people on your team. You're like a college basketball coach, right? Like I think college basketball coaches are kind of like the epitome of great leaders because they have to be recruiting, they have to be training, they have to be playing for championships, they have to be winning championships, and then when they win the championship, those guys graduate and go into the pros. And they got to do it all over again.
Right.
Like, oh man, like I just had a great team this year, and next year I got a bunch of freshmen.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
right.
And so I think that's the mark of good leadership is they're able to do all of those things at once. Recruit, train, play, win, and then launch. You know what I mean? And that's really, really difficult. But those are the type of leaders that like change the world.
For
so,
sure.
Yeah,
that's great. So a couple just rapid fire questions to kind of wrap things up. Apart from the Bible being number one, what would you say your next favorite book is?
Probably Chronicles of Narnia.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's awesome. That book actually, crazy enough, was what got me back and actually really enjoying reading.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Just the whole series. I've got the whole the whole series in one big giant book at home. It's the analogies, right? It's so Christ-like. You know, it's all, and it's just amazing to see the battle of good and evil, play out in real time in the real world, and it's modeled in the books. Lord of the Rings is another great one too. That's a little bit deeper read, right? But if you study, like if you go back, you read the Lord of the Rings books, like even pre the movie, right? Like, and even the creation when J.R. Tolkien was creating the Lord of the Rings universe, it actually models what I believe Psalm 81. Like most people don't realize this, but we are not the only image bearers of God in the universe, in the creation. Right. Psalm 81 says that God sits in the presence of gods, right? So he's Yahweh. He is the supreme God. But there's a whole nother class of gods who are also made in his image, right? And then there's angels, and then who would not necessarily be in his image. And then there's humans who are made in his image, right? And so in Tolkien's universe, he sets it up just like that with Luvatar, and then you have I think the 9 other gods underneath Luvatar, and you have Melkor, who became the evil god, right? That got all the other gods pulled away from Luvatar, and then Sauron was a disciple of Melkor, right? And that's where Middle Earth and the Battle of Middle Earth, unfolds. But so you see that, and you're like, and Tolkien was a genius when it came to linguistics, right? Like he studied the Hebrew and the Greek and Aramaic, and when he's reading Psalms. In that 81st chapter or 82nd chapter, he sees that, and we see it. If you read like the NIV, it just says God sits in the council of the saints. I think is what it says, right? Like I think so. The English translation makes it sounds like it's just like saints that have gone before, right? Like like us. That's not what it actually says. It says God sits in the council of other gods, right? And He is the supreme God. And those gods would not rule justly, so God raised Jesus himself up to rule justly, right? And that's why there's this big rebellion, the gods. And then you start talking about the Nephilim, right? Like, and now it makes sense. You're like, oh, okay, it wasn't angels sleeping with the daughters of men.
Right.
It was actually other men like creatures, like men, like gods. Like they actually had the anatomy that we would probably have, but they were just gods. They were stepping outside of their boundaries and sleeping with women, creating these giants of old, the Nephilim, right, who are half God, half man. And so we see, I mean, so you think this, you're like, man, this can't be real life. But then you look at it, that's one of the reasons God sent the flood, was to deal with the Nephilim. Right? And to say, hey, like, you guys have created so much death and destruction. And you go back throughout history and you read like mythology, right? And it's always the parody of that story. So in the truth and the Word of God, the half men, half gods were always the bad guys, in the reality, but like in Greek mythology,
Yeah.
they're the good guys,
Right.
right? So it's the devil. He doesn't create something new. He just
shifts it.
warps
Yep.
what God has done,
Yeah.
and he makes the bad guys good and the good guys bad. So you have Hercules,
Yeah.
he is like he's the mythology, the Greek mythology version of a Nephilim,
Yep.
right? But he's good, right?
Yeah.
He's just like superhero.
Yeah.
Well, why? Well, because the devil's like, yeah, he's on my side, right?
Right.
So I'm gonna
him look.
actually insert my own story, my own narrative. Like these are the good guys,
Right.
and really they were the bad guys, and they were. And so there's a great book. I would highly recommend it for people
Yeah.
if they really want to dive into this in detail.
Yeah.
It's a guy by the name of Michael Heiser. He
Okay.
wrote a book called The Unseen Realm.
Okay.
And it's fascinating because it really unlocks like the battle that we're in with demons and angels,
Yeah.
and really the sons of God, the fallen gods who for up until Christ had authority over the earth.
Wow.
And then Christ came, and Christ, took back that authority and gave it back to us. And now we have the authority. So we get to go in and, we get to take the land and take back what was once lost.
Yeah.
And I think it's just so stuff like that. And that means that then applies into modern, like your physical world. So that applies to politics.
Yep.
Take back the government,
Yeah.
which we lost. Like the devil, I mean, why was government always so corrupt for many, many eons? Because the devil had the authority, right, in that.
Yeah.
And so now, if the church of Jesus Christ, right, the bride of Christ, if we actually step up and step into the battle, we're going to win.
Yeah.
We just got to do it.
Right.
Right. Same thing in business. We can do the same thing in business, same thing in media and education, and we just got to. The victory's there. The question is, are we going to grab it? Right.
Yeah.
And so I think Chronicles of Narnia, J.R. Tolkien,
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings, Michael Heiser, The Unseen Realm. I really love the story of the American story, the story of us. It's David Barton. He's an American historian.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's really good. If you want to learn about follow wall builders, American history. I also do a lot of the Hillsdale online classes.
Okay.
So Hillsdale University or Hillsdale College, great college, one of the best colleges in the country. They have free online courses. They're free. It's called Hillsdale 101. I think, or it's I think if you just go to Hillsdale, just type in Hillsdale College and it will
Sure.
come up. It's really popular, and there's all these courses about everything. Like you can take this course. I took a course on Constitution history, right, which is awesome. Took a course on the Roman Republic, what the
Nice.
founders knew about the Roman, like how they looked at the Roman Republic, the Greek city-state, the life of David, the life of C.S. Lewis.
Yeah.
Like they have all of these amazing classes that you can take, and there's 30, 40-minute lectures, then there's tests, quizzes after every one. You can pass the class, you'll do a final, and then you get just a little certificate that says
cool.
it's all free. Like you don't have to pay for it. It's just
Yeah.
a great way if you love to learn.
Yeah.
Like it's a great way to learn.
That's
And
cool.
so those are some really and you're getting world-class professors who are teaching. So Hillsdale online, if you check it out, and it's fantastic.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Micah, this has been a great conversation.
Yeah, thanks,
and,
Chris. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, appreciate everything. And if you're watching this, if you have a conviction, go out there and just stand on it, learn more, get rooted deeper in it. And if you know someone who's trying to kind of stand on what they believe in, whether it be starting a business or their convictions, share this episode with them. Let's help more people together by doing that, and make sure to follow the show. But until next time, go out there, continue to elevate your life, elevate your brand, and we'll talk to you again soon.